Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Live with NORML. I'm J.M. Padini, the Development Director for the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. It's Friday, April 25th, 2025. You know what that means, friends. It's time for us to talk about this week's cannabis policy and science news, and for me to answer your burning questions live. Hey, take a quick second wherever you're watching. Hit that like, follow, or subscribe button and drop a note in the comments. Let us know where you are. Where are you watching from? And most importantly, if you have any burning questions. I got a surprise for you this week, friends. We're going to have a special guest. Hang in there with me while we get this all going. Thanks to everyone who just joined us on Instagram. Why is it not streaming correctly? Hey, if you're watching on Instagram, maybe let us know if you can see us for real, because it looks weird on my end, and I'll try and fix that. Hey, Nick in Pennsylvania. Good to see you, Nick. Hey, Mike in Anaheim. Hey, Rolling Stone in North Carolina. Hey, Brady. Welcome back, friend. It's been a minute. Sorry you're working. I'm working too. Hey, Randy. Hey, Insulin. Insulin, thank you for bringing up that gem. Yeah, I don't know why that's okay. That is broken. Insulin, Florida. Yeah, so we can talk about the DeSantis story a little bit. Let's say hi to some Nick. Stop guessing, and we'll go ahead since you already figured it out, Nick. Let's go ahead and welcome our special guest today. Is NORML's own Deputy Director Paul Armentano. Hey,
Good to be here, JM. I hope you didn't set the bar too high.
I didn't. They just got excited because they heard it was you. Nick could tell. Paul, why don't you give a little chit chat for a second? I'm gonna fix our Instagram feed because it's not doing what it's supposed to do.
What's it doing?
It's not streaming us. Most importantly, it was just streaming like a still picture of the screen. And, no one wants to see that.
Well, I have total confidence in you, JM, that you can
That's
get it
a
fixed.
lot, but thank you. Paul, what are we going to talk about this week?
We are going to talk about at least a couple of political stories that I think not only are important, but are indicative of sort of a general trend that you and I have been speaking about for the last several months. And that is the fact that we have lawmakers and elected officials in certain states that, recognizing they have been unable to win the hearts and minds of their constituents on the issue of marijuana policy reform, are now just sort of choosing to slam the door on those voters and say, we don't care what you think, we're going to move ahead with the policies we want anyway. And as I've said on numerous occasions to this audience and to reporters and anyone else who will listen, whether or not you think marijuana ought to be legal, putting all that aside, you should care about this issue, because when elected officials are acting in wholly undemocratic ways, that's a problem for all of us.
Sure is. And it's a particular problem this week for a number of states, at least 3 that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, but it's a particular problem for people who live in the state of Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about this week. What happened in Texas. We have been talking about this on live for a few weeks now, as the Attorney General Ken Paxton, Republican lawmaker in Texas, has filed lawsuits against every single city that attempted to implement their voter-approved marijuana depenalization ordinances that succeeded in last year's elections.
Well, it goes back further than that, JM, because Texas voters in a number of cities have been passing and enacting these ordinances going back now several years.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases, like in the case of Austin, Texas, for instance, these ordinances have been in place now for several years. Austin's depenalization ordinance was in place for 3 years until just now, because as you said,
Right.
the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, early last year decided to file suit against every city in the state of Texas that has enacted these voter-approved marijuana initiatives. And these include cities like Austin, which is home to nearly 1 million people who live in Texas, Dallas, which is home to 1.3 million Texans, San Marcos, which is home to nearly 100,000 individuals living in Texas, and about 5 or 6 other cities in the state of Texas. The Attorney General has filed suit against every single one of them. And this week, we had a 3-judge panel on the 15th Circuit Court of Appeals uphold Paxton's lawsuits and essentially strike down the marijuana depenalization initiatives in the city of San Marcos and then in the city of Austin. Now, my expectation is that this circuit court is going to strike down all of these ordinances because the language for all of them is the same, and therefore the court's reasoning or rationale for striking them down is going to be consistent and be the same throughout. This is a big deal. Texas, prior to cities passing these ordinances, was the marijuana arrest capital of the United States. There were certain years where 15, 20, 25% of all marijuana arrests that took place nationwide just took place in Texas. And we've seen those numbers in recent years come down significantly as different cities have adopted these policies that essentially told local police to take a hands-off approach to marijuana possession arrests within the city limits. And we've seen that marijuana possession arrests in Texas have fallen to about 25,000, 30,000 a year. That's still more than almost any other state, but it's not nearly as high as those numbers were just a few years ago, because literally cities like San Marcos, cities like Austin, we saw marijuana arrests go down to 0 in recent years because of the passage of these ordinances. And now we see that at least in the interim, while these cases continue to be litigated, police in those cities are going to go back to issuing citations and in some cases making marijuana arrests, not because city officials want them to, not because voters want them to, but because Attorney General Ken Paxton insists that they do so. And again, keep in mind, these were initiatives, these are measures that were not just approved by a slight majority of voters. In Austin, Texas, this measure that the court just struck down, that had been in place for 3 years, was passed by 85% of the voters.
Wow.
The San Marcos ordinance was passed by 81% of the voters. These were overwhelmingly popular policies that the Attorney General has fought to get struck down, and this week has successfully gotten struck down. And clearly, again, is going to move on to these other cities as well and try to get those ordinances struck down as well. If that's not ridiculous enough, there's also separately legislation that just was passed by the Texas Senate, that's now in the House, that would prohibit any future voter initiative from going to the ballot in any city in Texas if the purpose of that initiative is to try to decriminalize or depenalize marijuana possession. That is how, that, you know, to the degree to which Texas lawmakers are willing to sort of spit in the face of the voters of Texas, they are literally going against measures that 85% of their constituents have approved. And on top of that, they are trying to pass legislation to make sure voters can never weigh in on these issues ever again. Because they know that their position, that Texas's criminalization of marijuana is so unpopular, they're willing to go to these lengths to make sure voters no longer have any say in the marijuana policies in their own state.
Wow. Well, democracy at work, everyone. Yes, John, Jax is in Austin. Yes, that's correct. I imagine she's not super happy about what's happening there. John,
I will let people know the bill that we're talking about in Texas is Senate Bill 1870. If you go to NORML's Take Action Center, we have a legislative alert that is up right now that you can share with your local officials or your elected officials if you live in Texas, opposing Senate Bill 1870. And I'm pleased to say that over 1,300 Texans have shared that alert. Literally just within the last few hours. So it is important that your lawmakers know that if you live in Texas, this posture is entirely unacceptable to you.
There it is. The link to that action alert is in the chat now for everyone. Unless you're watching on Instagram, in which case you're just going to have to head to our website and go to the Take Action Center. You're going to go right to norml.org, click on the Take Action button and click on Texas, and you'll see it right there. I can write the short link for you, Normonius, in the chat. There you go. There you go, Instagram.
But you know,
Right.
Jay, what's amazing to me when you look at this is, you know, you would like to believe that the way our system works is that elected officials represent the interests of their constituents, that they don't work against those interests.
Mm-hmm.
And here we have an issue. We're in Texas, where it is entirely clear that the overwhelming majority of Texans, whether they're Democrats, whether they're independents, whether they're Republicans, they believe that the criminalization of marijuana in Texas is a failure. They believe that Texas marijuana laws, state marijuana laws, which are among the most stringent in the nation, need to be repealed. They have expressed this in polls. They've expressed it when they've had the ability to go to the ballot box. Yet, the way state lawmakers have reacted to this swelling of support from their own constituents is essentially to try and stand them down. They've dug in their heels and said, really, 85% of you want us to change the marijuana laws? Well, screw you. Not only are we not going to do that, we're going to make it impossible for you to weigh in on this in the future. That's how much they're willing to die on this hill. And if that infuriates you as a voter in Texas, then you need to let your lawmakers know. Because I guarantee they're not hearing that message enough. Because if they were, they wouldn't dare take this issue on the way that they're taking it on. They simply wouldn't. They'd be afraid to. They'd be afraid of the blowback.
Yeah, that's, it's this action alert hasn't been up for that long, but I would like to see more than 1,300 people sending emails opposing the efforts in Texas to take away your rights as voters. So if you're in Texas, you've got this action alert in the chat. Please be sure you are sharing that with everyone you know and love in Texas, and asking them to take action and share it as well.
Yeah. And as you and I have talked about, JM, this isn't just a Texas specific issue. We've seen this show before. We saw this in South Dakota several years ago, where voters approved an adult use marijuana legalization ballot initiative. And the governor, then Governor Kristi Noem, challenged that initiative after the fact, after the vote was already counted, and eventually was able to persuade the Supreme Court to nullify that vote, to just rescind it altogether. We saw a similar scenario in Mississippi several years ago where the voters passed medical marijuana and lawmakers weren't happy about that vote result and took the issue all the way to the Supreme Court. And not only had the Supreme Court strike down and nullify the medical marijuana vote, they also nullified the ballot initiative process altogether. They just wiped it out completely. And now, if you live in Mississippi, you no longer can vote on ballot initiatives because they threw the baby out with the bathwater. That's how desperately they wanted to overturn medical marijuana, that they threw out the entire initiative process. We saw this in Utah several years ago, where a voter initiative was approved by 60+% of the voters, and the legislature literally repealed it within days after the vote. So again, this is something we are seeing more and more of, particularly in these Republican-led states. When voters decide election outcomes with respect to marijuana legalization in a way that Republican lawmakers don't like, they simply try to overturn the election result. And we're seeing more and more often that they can successfully do that. And again, whether or not you believe marijuana ought to be legal or not, that should bother you simply as an American and as a voter in this country.
It absolutely should. And it isn't limited to ballot initiatives. We saw Ohio's law, which was a ballot measure, be implemented.
Right.
And now that legislature is again attempting to roll back provisions.
Yes. In that case, they're trying to do it legislatively. They are not going to the courts and simply trying to have the vote rescinded. But yes, they have. In Ohio, we've seen GOP leadership in both the Senate and the House introduce dueling proposals to try to significantly curtail the rights that voters won when they approved issue 2 in 2023, legalizing the adult use of marijuana.
So a lot of our effort in telling you all, dear viewers, this is to illustrate just how serious we are when we say, look, they're coming for your rights, and NORML's here working to help protect those. It's up to you to not let those go up in smoke. We're not being hyperbolic. These things are real. These attacks are happening around the country, in courthouses and in legislatures. And there aren't a lot of people coming to the rescue, friends.
No, and we are working day and night to try to stand up for these rights, to try to make sure that these votes mean something. And we provide a litany of tools to help the folks on the ground stand up for these rights as well. And we're serious when we go into these elections, and JM, you and I have these discussions, and we say, it matters who you vote for, because it's lawmakers that are making these decisions. And yes, I see chats all the time. I see our comments page all the time. They'll say, oh, well, you should vote all those lawmakers out. Really? Is that realistic? We're talking about states in some cases where 70, 80% of the legislature is made up of Republicans, and 70 to 80% of those lawmakers are voting against these measures. You're not going to wipe out 70, 80% of the legislature. But it is important to know who you're voting for and where they stand on this issue, because these folks don't make it a secret. We know going into these elections where so many of these folks stand on marijuana, and it shouldn't surprise anybody when they follow through. You know, I know, JM, you and I, we're going to talk about New Hampshire in a bit. New Hampshire just elected a new governor in November, in Kelly Ayotte. And it shouldn't surprise anybody that in the last few days, Senate Republicans, who outnumber Democrats 2-1 in that chamber and carry water for the new Republican governor, Kelly Ayotte, have systematically gone and either killed or tabled every House-backed marijuana reform bill that has entered that chamber. And they've done it because Kelly Ayotte does not support reforming marijuana laws. She doesn't support decriminalization. She doesn't support adult use. She doesn't support expanding medical use. We knew that going into the election. We told people that if you care about this issue in New Hampshire and you vote for Kelly Ayotte, you are not going to get any progress on marijuana policy reform while she's governor. And that's what has happened. JM, I know you've been through this in Virginia, where it was very clear, if and when Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin becomes governor, there will be no more advancement of marijuana policy reform in Virginia. And it shouldn't surprise anyone that he has, in the last 2 years, vetoed legalization implementation legislation because he said he was going to do that as governor.
Yes, absolutely. And there are, multiple newspapers right now and TV stations that are showing the most recent news on this, where I make pretty clear that if Virginians who are electing a new governor this November, if they don't elect a governor who will sign a bill to implement retail sales for adult use cannabis, the next shot they'll have at it is 2030. It's up to you all. You have to make good choices when you vote. I dropped the link to NORML's cannabis voter guide called Smoke the Vote. It's at vote.norml.org. I dropped it in the chat for everyone. I put it on the Instagram for you as well. But vote.norml.org. Make sure you know who's on the ballot and where they stand on cannabis policy. If they don't have a position, then that should tell you right there that they don't even think it matters. They don't have a position because they haven't made one. I assure you, our interns are scouring the internet right now for all of these primary candidates that in the elections that are coming up to see if they have a position. And if they don't, that tells you a lot right there as well.
Yeah. I'd also let people know that we typically send questionnaires to the candidates.
Sure do.
And if they still don't have a position, it's because they're choosing not to take one, because we have personally asked them what their position is.
Yes, they are. We've got Minnesota has a special election this coming week on the 29th. So does Iowa. Then Louisiana's got a special on May 3rd. New Hampshire has a special on May 6th. Oklahoma, May 13th. Massachusetts, May 13th. South Carolina, June 3rd. Then we get into the primaries, with New Jersey's primary being June 10th. Virginia's primary is June 17th, though early voting for Virginia primary begins May 2nd. Alabama has a special election on June 24th, and then Arizona has a special election July 15th. So that's a lot of states with a lot of elections coming up, and we are working really hard to make sure that these candidates have the opportunity to tell you, the voter, where they stand on cannabis policy. So make sure you know before you head to the ballot box. Yeah, let's talk about Arkansas. This week, Arkansas's Republican governor, Sarah Sanders, vetoed legislation that would have provided more access to medical cannabis for patients by allowing dispensaries to make direct to patient deliveries. We're not talking about letting Uber deliver weed. We're talking about the dispensary itself delivering directly to the patient, and then also allowing these medical cannabis dispensaries to have drive-through windows so that patients can pick up their medication at the drive-through window without having to get out of the car, find someone to watch their kids.
Only if they've placed an online order that day.
Right, you have to order in advance. We have these in Virginia. It's not a big deal. Virginia
It's a
has
big deal in Arkansas. It's such a big deal that the governor vetoed the bill. And I would mention that was bipartisan legislation. That there was Democrats backing that bill and Republicans. In fact, the lead sponsor of that bill was Republican, who apparently was taken quite by surprise that the bill was vetoed. Particularly when you read Governor Sanders' veto message, that didn't make any sense. She said she vetoed it because she didn't want to increase the use of marijuana in the state of Arkansas, which the bill would have done.
So stupid. That seems to be a narrative around with a number of Republican governors right now that, well, they don't want to increase access.
Right. Folks might remember the now governor of Arkansas when she was the press secretary during the first Trump administration. That is the same. Governor Sanders is the same as Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who held that position some years ago, and I'm sure folks are familiar with her. But yes, she vetoed the bill, and despite the fact that it actually passed the House and Senate with fairly wide majorities, the sponsor of the bill made clear that there wouldn't be any effort to try to override that veto. Essentially sort of saying because it's simply considered impolite to do so in Arkansas. Yeah,
it's considered impolite amongst Republican caucuses.
To go against their own party's governor.
They don't. We have the same situation here with our Republican caucus in Virginia. Well, it's not all bad news out of the states, friends.
I would just add that the reason there is legal medical marijuana in Arkansas is not because of anything that the legislature did, but because voters approved a ballot initiative about 8 years ago or so now, legalizing medical marijuana there.
Yeah. Hey, yes, John, Arkansas does need a new governor. Hey, Sean, thanks for joining us. I'm gonna catch up on some comments right here. Brady, listen, my dude, there's never anything worth talking about out of Georgia. No major changes that I'm aware of since last week.
No, in fact, if you go again, you can go to our Take Action page. You can click on the map, click on Georgia. So Georgia is a state where the legislature has now moved beyond what's known as the crossover date. That is a date when bills have to have been passed through their chamber of origin. So in other words, a bill introduced in the House of Representatives must have been passed by the House by a certain date. And if that hasn't happened, it's dead. If a bill is introduced in the Senate, it needs to have been passed by the Senate in advance to the House. And if that hasn't happened, it's dead. All of the bills that we were tracking in Georgia, except one bill we are simply monitoring that makes some minor changes to the state's sort of nascent medical marijuana program. That bill did cross over, but all of the other bills that were more substantive, no action was taken ahead of their crossover date. So they're simply dead for the session due to inactivity.
Yeah, Brady, so you'll see that the putting Georgia's Patients First Act did cross over the House version and the Senate version, and the penalty reduction bill did not. There hadn't been any action on it since January, so that'll drop off the map.
Yeah, I see someone in the comments asked about Idaho. Idaho's session for 2025 is over. So there is Idaho is a part-time legislature. The legislature is no longer in session. So the bills that were enacted by Idaho lawmakers this year when they were in session were bills we opposed. They are not bills we supported. Idaho did enact, they became the first state to enact mandatory minimum penalties for minor marijuana possession. That bill was passed and signed into law this year. And the legislature also passed a measure to put on the ballot a question next year that, if passed, will make it so that voters can never decide on a ballot question or a ballot initiative to legalize or decriminalize marijuana. So that is what came out. That's what your lawmakers did with marijuana this year. They enacted mandatory minimum penalties, and they put a question to voters to try to make it so that voters can never weigh in on this issue going forward.
This is the one that would require instead require it to go through the legislature.
Yes, it would amend the state's constitution to say that only the state legislature can enact changes that would liberalize drug policies or penalties in the state. And voters will be deciding on that question next year.
Yeah, so, if you don't like having the ability to vote on things, voters, then I guess vote against your own interest.
Yeah. And again, I'd like to say that in the case of Idaho, these were close votes, but they weren't. Both these policies passed overwhelmingly.
Yeah, I imagine there's not much of a. I imagine the minority party is very minor.
Yes, very much so. Shockingly so.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's see if anyone else has any questions.
I see some folks asking about Pennsylvania as well. Again, so Pennsylvania is a state that is in session pretty much all year. So there have been some bills introduced that we are supporting. There are other bills that we are anticipating to be introduced shortly that we will also be supporting. Again, go to NORML's Take Action page. I think we have alerts up for 6 or 7 different bills thus far that have been introduced in Pennsylvania. And to be clear, because someone did also ask it in the comments, we are not supportive of the proposals in Pennsylvania that would seek to try to regulate marijuana sales through the ABC store model or the Pennsylvania sort of state-owned liquor store model. There's a number of reasons for that, but the primary one is because we are of the belief, and most legal scholars are as well, that implementing such a model would create what's known as a positive conflict with federal law, and therefore would open such a policy up for litigation that the state of Pennsylvania would likely lose. New Hampshire considered a similar model last year and ended up abandoning pursuing that model for those same reasons. New Mexico several years ago at one point considered that model. They also abandoned it. They ended up passing the sort of traditional private licensed retailer model. And that's what every state that thus far has legalized marijuana has done.
Yeah, Utah tried that with medical cannabis, and that's just my go-to. Look, if Utah figured out that this was not a legally tenable approach, then what are you struggling with, Pennsylvania? Utah figured it out.
Yeah.
Thank you, Devon, for asking that question. That was a good one.
What's really interesting too in Pennsylvania is Pennsylvania has a working medical marijuana law and program right now. And the dispensaries obviously are privately owned. So why Pennsylvania lawmakers would presume that medical marijuana can be regulated in this manner, but that adult use sales can't be, is really beyond me. It makes no sense, and I don't think voters. I think voters largely understand this, and they're not particularly supportive of that model. And we are anticipating that the primary legalization bills this year, or the vehicles for legalization, are not going to be proposing that model.
They are not. No. I think it is limited just to this one memo that was issued with this one proposal, which isn't even a bill yet. We have 5 bills up in Pennsylvania in the tracker right now. We've got a medical cannabis expansion. We've got a decriminalization. We've got a DUID, patient protection bill, another decrim bill, home cultivation for patients. That's what's in the tracker right now for active bills. But then up in the legalization section, the states end marijuana arrests. No, legalization itself. In legalization itself, you'll see the Pennsylvania alerts for just say no to state-run dispensaries, including our new printable sign, in case you're having an event and you want to have a sign. It's right there for you on the Take Action page. Hey, John, thanks for bringing up Maryland's Governor Wes Moore, because we do have some good news out of states this week.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the next story. Let's go right into that.
Governor Moore signed legislation this week that will seal the past convictions of anyone with a misdemeanor marijuana possession arrest from public view. So essentially, any database where that arrest would appear in or would have in the past, not the public, not an employer, not a potential landlord, none of these entities would be able to access those records. So they should not, the stigma surrounding those past arrests should not be a further burden going forward for literally hundreds of thousands of Marylanders anymore. This was a bill that was actually pushed by the governor. It's sort of a follow-up to the pardon actions he took last year when he issued sweeping pardons for these same people. But pardons don't expunge convictions. Pardons can't make a conviction go away. That's why he encouraged the legislature to take this step to seal these convictions from public view. They did, and he signed the bill. Again, that's a major victory and a win for people in Maryland.
And this over 175,000 convictions, I believe, in Maryland that Wes Moore took action on.
Yes.
In North Dakota, I know, unbelievably, in North Dakota, we have good news out of that state too.
Yeah, North Dakota's been a mixed bag this year. There was a decriminalization bill there that actually passed its chamber of origin fairly overwhelmingly. So I had high hopes for it, but then it was killed by the Senate. But we did see this week the governor sign legislation to allow for the limited production and dispensing of edible medical cannabis products. It may come as a surprise because North Dakota voters legalized by initiative medical marijuana access, I believe, in 2016. But that bill or that initiative only allowed for botanical forms of cannabis to be used by patients. In later years, lawmakers expanded that to include topical products and tinctures and capsules. But there was no provision allowing for the production or the sale of edible forms of cannabis. And that has now changed, and those products will be coming to market rather soon. And patients for the first time in that state will be able to finally access them.
I think that's great. And, I'm fully prepared to hear people complaining about the way they define it, but who cares? If writing this language in a way that makes those conservative lawmakers emotionally comfortable with allowing chewable forms of medical cannabis to be dispensed, it doesn't matter that they limit it to a geometric square shape. I think it's almost comical, but soft or hard lozenges in a geometric square shape.
Yes. And
And
no more than 5 milligrams of THC per single serving.
they call them cannabinoid. Like, is it lozenges or something?
Yeah, they did.
I just remember like that when I was reading the code last night, like they use the word cannabinoid a lot.
They did. They did.
A
There were
lot, a
also
lot.
dueling bills. There was they both had pretty much exactly the same language, but one bill capped the THC limit at 10 milligrams, and one bill capped it at 5 milligrams. And if FanDuel allowed us to bet on which bill would have been the one that would have been successful, I think I would have put every last dollar I had on the bill that had the lower THC threshold as the bill that would eventually pass and be signed into law.
Absolutely. Cannabinoid edible product. Whatever. It's not the first state to adopt a 5 milligram per dose limit. 10 is far more common. Again, it's North Dakota, so
yeah, I believe Montana's going to impose a 5 milligram limit this year as well. Right now, their limit's 10, but there's a bill to lower it to 5 that I believe is advanced through both chambers, if I'm not incorrect.
They must really want people to get back into that illicit market activity.
Yeah, or to take several edibles instead of just one.
Buy more. Yeah, I've never heard of a cannabis operator who's advocating for a policy like that. Lest anyone think that that's where it's coming from. Yes, insulin says you can't just eat 2 squares. You can, but it's going to cost you more money that way. If you've ever shopped edibles at a legal dispensary where you have the choice of strengths, you'll notice that the price does increase for the higher strength, but it doesn't double in price when you get double the dose. So you can, but again, another example of just, who cares what's best for consumers? Who cares what the evidence says? Let's just do something that I think it feels good. So let's just do that.
Yeah, it's all about control. It's lawmakers thinking, well, if we limit the dosage to this arbitrary amount, we feel like we're actually sort of dictating how consumers or patients are going to behave. Of course, not recognizing that, okay, well, instead of taking 1, they'll take 2.
Yeah, just more expensive for consumers. That's the name of the game.
Yeah.
Treat consumers like ATMs.
I see a lot of questions about North Carolina. Again, if you go to our Take Action page, we do have alerts up for a couple of bills in North Carolina, a medical marijuana legalization bill, an adult use legalization bill. North Carolina has a relatively long session compared to other states. It's going to continue for several more months. Their crossover date isn't until sometime in May. So no action has been taken on any of those bills as of yet. But the deadline with which lawmakers have to take action hasn't been reached yet either. So there is definitely still time, if you're in North Carolina, to be using our alerts and agitating lawmakers to advance these policies.
And those links are in the chat for you all now. You've got House Bill 1011, which is the medical cannabis legalization bill, and you have House Bill 413, which is the adult use legalization bill. Please be sure you are taking action on those. It looks like 732 constituent emails have been sent in support of medical cannabis legalization in North Carolina, and 1,084 letters have been sent in support of adult use legalization. Let's get those numbers up. Those are way too low. Look at how many people.
Politicians in North Carolina really need to hear from folks on this.
Absolutely.
There has been inaction by that legislature now for several years running, even on the medical bills. Some of those have been debated. I believe that a couple of years ago, a bill passed out of its chamber of origin But again, leadership has been really reluctant to prioritize any marijuana policy changes, including medical, which is very popular, polls very well in North Carolina.
Thank you, Samuel and Rolling Stone, for setting this action alerts. Appreciate that. Looking at Tennessee, I see it. We've got a lot of dead bills in Tennessee.
Yeah, Tennessee doesn't have a crossover date, but the session, I believe, is actually supposed to end today. If it has not, then it is going to wind down within the next day or so. So any bill that hasn't been heard is going to be dead for the session.
It's a little difficult to tell just from this interface right here. The ones that are dead, I can see. The ones that are introduced, I'm not going to talk about. What does it look like?
Yeah, I know there are a couple legalization bills there. There are a couple of medical bills there. The legalization, at least one of the legalization bills was voted down, and several of the other bills never received a hearing.
Yeah, that was the adult use bill, HB 703 is dead. The adult use bill, HB 836 is dead. Their HB 872 is a medical cannabis bill that looks like the last action was in February. It says it's in committee. It's not telling me much about it.
Yeah, and again, that just means the bill was assigned to a committee and the committee chose never to take the bill up.
Yeah, I'm not seeing crossover on any of the Tennessee bills. Just one that says in committee. Is that? So yeah, again, not much to say about Tennessee other than the decrim bill that says it's in committee and the medical cannabis bill says it's in committee.
And again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but when we're talking about some of these states and people bring up Arkansas, or they bring up Tennessee, or they bring up North Dakota, look, these are generally states that are Republican dominated. And while marijuana policy reform might be a bipartisan issue among voters, it is a very much a partisan issue among elected officials. And unfortunately, Republicans, by and large, vote no on marijuana policy reform. So it makes it a very, very steep hill to climb in states like Tennessee or Florida or Texas or Arkansas to try to move these proposals legislatively, because you're up against a dominant party that has not only no interest in moving these bills, but is outright hostile to the idea of liberalizing marijuana policies.
Yeah, Nick, I see your comment. Nick, I don't know that we're necessarily in a completely nothingness session for Pennsylvania. There was a memo issued recently for bipartisan adult use bill. This is the bill that's the real deal. So let's.
Yeah, I would agree. That bill hasn't been introduced yet, but it's coming. If there is a vehicle to move forward with adult use, it's going to be that bill. As a fallback, there is also a straight decriminalization bill that also potentially could get some momentum in the legislature as well.
Yeah. Brady loves to ask this question, Paul, and we're coming up on the end of your time here. So, and at live, not at normal. Let's be clear. You can never leave. So I'm gonna pose it for both of us. Brady says this. I've been smoking on a strain called Lemon Tree, and it's been amazing. What type of cannabis would you suggest?
Well, JM, as I always answer that question, I suggest legal cannabis. I suggest lab-tested cannabis. I believe that consumers have a right to know what's in the product that they're consuming, and there's a way to get that knowledge, and that's by patronizing the legal market and going through state licensed stores that test their products for purity and potency.
And if that's not your thing, I hope you live in a state where you can cultivate your own. I hope you live in a state where NORML made it possible for you to cultivate your own. I know Paul does. I know I live in a state that NORML made it possible for adults to cultivate their own. This isn't to say that there's some, NORML's not an industry organization. So our focus is not on who gets to get a license first or next and gets to make money off of consumers first or next. Our focus is solely on consumers. And what Paul said is so very true. You do deserve to know that what's on the label is what's actually in the package. I went to the barber this morning and they had their questions ready for me. JM, I saw this drink at the corner store. Should I buy it? Well, already you've told me words that want me to say no. I don't know why at the corner store. You could buy it, and it actually turned out to be a brand I had heard of before. I'd seen some advertising campaigns run for it, not necessarily legally, but it seemed like, okay, maybe it sounds like that's a big brand. They're probably using at least good manufacturing practices, so the liquid itself probably doesn't have mold in it, but you don't know where you got the cannabinoids from. I don't know why there's 30 milligrams of THC in one drink, one can, being sold to you at the gas station, but you don't know either. So those are choices you can make for yourself, consumers, but you really do deserve to know that what's on the label is what's in the package. And
yeah, absolutely. And I don't think as consumers you'd accept any less when it came to other things that you put in your body. So why expect less when it comes to your cannabis?
People are mad when their phones get too hot, or they think their phones are going to give them brain cancer. Like, I know that every time I open a can of water, that's what's in here, it's going to be exactly the same. There's not going to be anything in it because the FDA at least used to have standards for that. And the same thing holds true for cannabis, but it does vary state by state. So if your state does not have, require third-party analytical laboratory testing, then maybe get on that. There are states that are not as stringent as others when it comes to consumer safety standards for cannabis and testing. And, a certificate of authenticity doesn't necessarily carry the same weight across all states. You want to make sure that it's a real lab that's testing the products. And you can do that by making sure your legislature passes laws that protect you, the consumer. There's no cannabis industry without cannabis consumers. And so we all need to make sure we're being heard on that issue. It is not get at the back of the line consumers while we prioritize business interests. It's consumers are first, because consumers are the ones that make the market. So if the market's not meeting your needs, make your voice heard. And we're here to help you do that. We're very much here to help you do that. That's so many resources for you, from our action alerts to our Smoke the Vote, Cannabis Voter Guide. We want to make sure you know how to protect your rights. Thank you, Samuel. Thank you, Samuel, for that. That's nice. Paul, I think we have one last story that we could share with everyone, and then I'm going to wrap up with the events that we have coming up this week, which you can hang out for or you can leave. I don't care. But there's a survey done. My favorite part about the survey is that it was done by the CDC. And I think in particular, some factions in the federal administration are probably annoyed that this is even a survey that happened or a question that was asked. But they did do a survey, and they asked about how people are typically consuming cannabis. And I know this will just absolutely come as a surprise to all of you watching, but 79% of consumers surveyed said smoking is how they primarily consume cannabis. other insight did you pick up from that report, Paul?
That number has largely remained the same for many years. It didn't surprise me because, again, we've known historically that most people who use cannabis smoke cannabis. You know, the next popular method of ingestion was edibles, although it was, you know, lagging fairly significantly behind smoking. To me, the only other really sort of notable piece of information from that was that concentrates were very low on the scale. There is a lot of media attention that are paid to concentrates and so-called high THC products. And our political opponents in recent years have really tried to seize on the fact that these products exist as a way to try to argue for rolling back legalization in its entirety. And the fact remains, and I say this over and over again, that while these products exist, they don't represent, or they're not representative of the market overall. And they're really not particularly popular among consumers. And that really shouldn't surprise folks. If we look at alcohol as a model, we see that alcohol is available to consumers in a variety of potencies, including very, very low potency alcohol, like non-alcoholic beer, to very, very high potency alcohol, like grain alcohol. And when one looks at the market of what consumers typically gravitate toward in the alcohol market, they don't gravitate toward the highest potency product. They don't gravitate toward Bacardi 151 or Everclear grain alcohol. They tend to gravitate toward the low to moderate forms of alcohol, like beer and wine. And we see this same principle play out in the marijuana market mostly as well. The majority of consumers gravitate toward flower, they smoke, they don't gravitate toward high potency products and concentrates. Yes, there's a portion of the market that does, but it's not the majority of the market.
Yeah. You know, I started laughing. I was going to say on the inside, but it probably was not. It was probably on the outside too. I started laughing when you were talking about different alcohol potencies and how that also, we have to talk about that so often when we were talking about how consumers self-titrate when they consume cannabis, as if, you know, selling a concentrate, which would be like selling vodka, and selling you know, flour, which is like selling your average beer. You don't ingest, as a consumer, presumably you're not ingesting them in the same way.
Of course.
You don't say, well, I've got a pint glass of beer, which is typically how you get beer served, so I'm just going to fill up this pint glass the same way with that vodka and pound the whole thing. And people seem to understand this just fine with alcohol. But when you talk about cannabis, that is a foreign topic.
Yeah.
Because clearly you have no self-control.
Yeah, and again, you know, this has been a talking point that our opponents have used now for the last few years. You know, they say, well, there's 99.9% THC products out there. First of all, as if. And second of all, those sort of potent products are not particularly popular. They're not used by the typical consumer. So again, you know, they're a talking point that you and I have to spend a lot of time responding to. But as this national survey data shows, it's not what the overwhelming majority of cannabis consumers gravitate toward.
It's certainly.
Nor do I think they will in the future. You know, I've seen a lot of marketing, advertorial type content over the last decade talking about how consumers are going to switch over away from smoking and they want to go to all these other methods of ingestion and concentrated products. And I think to myself, My understanding as a industry, your best margins are on those concentrated products. And I've always presumed that's why you're promoting them, not because the consumers are demanding them, but because it's easier to make a profit on those products and you make less of a profit on a traditional flower. But again, when consumers are calling the shots, they tell us that traditional flower is generally what they want.
Yeah. Paul, did you happen to look at the questions themselves in that survey? Were they lumping smoking? Was it smoking, vaping, and then concentrate separately, or was it in edibles, or was it?
Vaping was a separate category. That was also very low on the list. Not as
Presumably,
low as concentrates, but it was the next lowest.
was it smoking, edibles, vaping, concentrates? There you go. Yes, Brian, dabs. That's exactly what we're talking about when we say loose concentrates. Which sounds disgusting because it sounds disgusting. Brady, I was at the liquor store, the state-run liquor store yesterday, because there's one right next door to our kids' dance studio is a state-run liquor store. Not kidding. Super convenient if you need to go to the liquor store while you're waiting for ballet to be over, and I did. And an adult, well, obviously they're all adults, but this grown man walked in, picked up what he wanted, and it was close to me, so I was like, oh, I wonder what that was. It was Jägermeister. 2025, friends. Grown-ups buying Jägermeister. And he didn't have to he went right in, and that's what he was getting. I know, it was wild. Thank you, Brian, for sharing all of those delightful terms with us. Appreciate that so much, Brian. Hey, Castle on Instagram. If you're still there, I know you had asked a little while ago about an update on the pilot program in Sacramento for cannabis lounges. I haven't seen anything recently come from California NORML. I did a quick Google search, and the last news hits on that topic were around the end of last year. So it looks like there's still just the one cannabis lounge in Sacramento that's operating. Have you heard anything else on that, Paul?
I have not, but I just read a couple of lounges in Nevada closed recently. And I would add that Governor Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland, who we were referring to earlier, signed legislation this week to allow for the establishment of cannabis lounges in that state. It's
so smart. And if you are in a state that has a high volume of tourism, it's so critical that you give people a place to go, unless you just are looking to shoot fish in the barrel, essentially, and have people getting fined or whatever your state imposes for public consumption. It's so much more than, I don't know what lawmakers are thinking about when they're thinking about this topic, but it's not real world scenarios. I'm quite sure of that. It's more than you need a bar to go get high at. People need a place to consume, especially in really high tourist areas. Give them a law that they can comply with instead of one that's just difficult for them to work around. All right, friends. Got a couple of events coming up that I want to tell you about.
All right, JM, I've got to log off.
All right.
I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and to chat with NORML's audience, and look forward to do it again.
Thanks, Paul.
All right. Take care.
All right, friends, let's get into some details of what's coming up this weekend. Listen, Saturday. Tomorrow, that's right. Tomorrow is Saturday. And Missouri NORML is having their spring conference. They are going to stream the whole thing live on their Facebook, which is Missouri NORML. It's facebook.com/Missouri NORML. I know, because I've typed that about 100 times this week. Let me drop that into the chat for everyone except for you fine people on Instagram, where links don't matter. But listen, Instagram, thing's going to stream on Facebook. So Missouri NORML's Facebook. It's free. It's free. It's free. They have some great speakers. They're going to talk about not just state issues, but national issues as well, including NORML's own Keith Stroup, who's going to be on at 4:15, just sort of talking about his work in founding NORML and in leading the movement for decades to legalize America. So check that out. 1 to 5 p.m. Central Time. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Nick, for putting that in there. I'll take a look at that in a second. Then on Monday, hey, are you in DC or somewhere where you can easily get to DC? Cool. Come and see me and Morgan at the National Cannabis Policy Summit. It's April 28th, Monday. The networking reception starts at 8:45. In the morning. The policy summit goes until 5 p.m. and then there's a reception afterward that goes till 7. You can get free registration for all of this right now. I'm going to drop those links for you in the chat. If you're on Instagram, National Cannabis Festival is on Instagram. National Cannabis Festival produces the policy summit. So you can connect that way. There are also links to it on NORML and Virginia NORML's Instagram for the National Cannabis Policy Summit, a free event at the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library in Washington, D.C. Come say hi. Come see me. Come get resources. Come see Morgan. It'll be great. Coming up in June. Oh, I have a banner for this one. Ready? Let's get it. I got to get everything ready. Okay. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Coming up in June is our 2 events. First, I'm going to tell you about the party. The 2025 NORML Formal is hosted by our good friends at the Cannabis Means Business Expo. They have a really exciting B2B rooftop bash right the night before the expo opens. And at their rooftop bash, they host the NORML Formal for us. This is June 3rd from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. It's at the Yotel in New York City. And I got you. Listen, cannabismeansbusiness.com. That's the website. Gotta drop another link in here for you too. And if you want, I can give you a code, you can use code NORML25 to get a free exhibit hall or to get 30% off, huge savings, off of any of their conference passes. Now, if you want to come to the NORML Formal at the Rooftop Bash, then go ahead and make sure you use that, get that free exhibit hall pass, and then add on your NORML Formal ticket. And you'll get 30% off with code NORML25. You have to be registered for the event. So you have to have either a conference pass or an exhibit hall pass in order to get a ticket, in order to purchase a ticket to the Rooftop Bash with 30% off. Got it? NORML25. Don't spell it wrong. Okay. Ready? We're getting into the summer a little further now. We got the National Cannabis Festival coming up in July 18th and 19th. This is at RFK Festival Grounds in Washington, D.C. NationalCannabisFestival.com. You can find National Cannabis Festival on Instagram. I was going to tell you what their user ID was, like I just knew it off the top of my head, because I was so certain. But then I started to doubt myself. There it is. It's NATL Cannabis Fest. NATL Cannabis Fest, if you want to connect with them on Instagram. But NationalCannabisFestival.com. It's a 2-day concert with lots of vendors and advocacy and speakers at the festival. make sure you buy your tickets now if you want to go, because they have sold out for many, many years. Yes, John, there is an event in Key West, Florida. Thank you for the introduction, because here we go. The last event I had to tell you about for now is the 2025 NORML Key West Legal Seminar. This is December 4 through 6 at Hyatt Centric Key West in Florida. You can get full details at normal.org/Key West. Got that Instagram, normal.org/Key West. This is a really excellent legal seminar. If you're a practicing attorney and you need CLEs, we got you. Our legal seminars are fully accredited in all states that require continuing legal education credits for their practicing attorneys. If you don't need CLEs or you're not an attorney, we still got you. We got you with a discounted registration rate. You can check all of that out at normal.org/Key West. Come to Key West, see me, see Paul, see Keith, hang out, have a great time. Brian says I usually say something just to make you laugh. Does it work? Yes, it does. Even if I don't say it out loud. Even if I don't say it out loud, my face probably does. What? Oh, that's something. Okay. Those are some very interesting comments. I'm not gonna. Hey, Samuel, if I didn't get to say hi to you, hi. Nikos, thanks for letting us know about the lounge in Lemoore. Cool. Sean, thank you for joining us. Hey, Real, good to see you. All right, that was fun. We caught all up. Hey, Amy, thank you for watching. I may have just had to tell Taylor you were watching, just for fun. Hey, Normonius, thanks for all your questions. I really appreciate those on Instagram today. Wherever you're watching, please take a quick second to hit that like, follow, or subscribe button so you never miss when NORML goes live. We try to do this show Fridays at 4 o'clock. Sometimes we don't, but more often than not, we do. So go ahead, push that button so you don't miss us. If you like these stories and you want them just delivered to you every week, hey, we can do that. Go to normal.org/subscribe. Put in your email. Make sure you check the weekend weed read box. That way you always get it. So tomorrow morning, about 9 a.m. Eastern, NORML's weekend weed read is going to be dropping in inboxes. Don't miss yours. It's a really great thing to, start your morning with. A little coffee, little weed news. You do you. And then on Thursdays is the big news day of the week here at NORML, when we publish NORML News of the Week. That starts hitting inboxes about, that's right, 4:20 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays. So make sure you're subscribed at normal.org/subscribe. And if you haven't joined yet, today is the perfect day to join NORML, friends. NORML membership is $42 annually. So head to normal.org/join, drop some coins, get a card from me. I'm going to mail it to you personally. That's just how we are here. Thank you to someone who's watching in Poland. Yes, I love that. And where else? There was someone else from another country that was far, and it just was, I just love seeing where you all are from. That's always really exciting to see how many people are tuning in to our nerdy little weed chats. I love it. Oh, whatever. Look, that's funny. Okay. This has been a blast, friends. I love hanging out with y'all on Fridays. Make sure that you hit that button so you don't miss when we go live. And I'm J.M. Padini. I'm the development director here at the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. I hope you all have an awesome weekend. And as always, I'll see you right back here next time. Bye-bye.